my god, it's that time of year again, guys. It is now finally time, after 200 films, to give you my best list of the year. And I'm just going to say right now, considering how many films that I did watch this year, which I saw way too many. I'll just tell you that right now. I saw the most films that I've ever seen, and I know I'm crazy. I've seen over 280 films this year, which is just, I have no idea how I was able to do that. Um, it was obviously very difficult to make this list, and considering how many that I did watch, I knew that a top 10 or a top 20, that just wasn't going to do this list justice. So I actually went one step beyond. I'm going to be doing a top 30 movies of 2018. There was a lot of great stuff I saw this year. I think this was basically equally as good as last year, at least in my eyes, I think it was. There was a lot of stuff that I really loved. There's a lot of movies that very much did stick with me, and there are some that I just would not feel right with leaving them off this list. So for those reasons alone, it's going to be a much longer video. This is going to be a longer video for sure, but I think it definitely is the right video, to end the year on. But either way, we're just going to jump into it right now. Now, again, considering that there were so many films, there are only so many that I can put on this list because I did see a lot of stuff. So there were a couple of honorable mentions here. And I will just tell you right now, some of the movies that you're going to see on this list, I unfortunately did not have time to review. But I am finally going to say something about them. But we're just going to get into the honorable mentions, starting off with Annihilation, First Reformed, Love, Simon, a movie that I did not get to review but really wanted to, The Endless, Private Life, Ralph Breaks the Internet, A Quiet Place, The Miseducation of Cameron Post, Number 2 Part 2, Vice, The Night Comes for Us, The Other Side of the Wind, Bodied, and The House That Jack Built. All of these films are fantastic in their own way. There are a lot of things that I really do love about them, but there were 30 movies that were better than these, and we're just going to start off with number 30. Now, this year, a lot of people have been talking about the film Lean on Pete, and while I definitely enjoy that film a lot more, the more effective horse movie easily is The Rider, and maybe it's just because this film is basically an autobiography, and that alone gives it the slighter edge, but this film, I think, is one of the most effective and just emotional films of the entire year. Not only is this a very human story, but it's one that I think is incredibly relatable for everyone. We all have that one passion that we love to do in our lives. It's something that drives every single action that we do. What I'm doing right now, this is my passion. This is what I really love to do. But for other people, there are other things that they might love. But for our character here, that was, that was horse racing. That was being involved in riding this horse and things like that. And him having to give that all up. It's just so sad to watch. There's something so saddening about it, but there also is something sort of hopeful about that message of trying to begin again and things like that. I think is one that a lot of films forget to include. A lot of films just want to depress you, and while this film, it is depressing, it tries to be a little bit more hopeful. And Brady Jandreau, I think, is one of the best, one of the most understated performances of the entire year. Everything about him, I think he definitely is going to be a huge star after this film. It honestly, you can tell at points this really is not acting, since he did actually go through this in real life. It's such a heartbreaking and emotional film that a lot of people didn't see. I really wish it was getting more recognition because it really is something fantastic. But if you haven't seen it, check it out because I definitely think it's going to do something for you. And for all those reasons alone, it's definitely number 30. Like I said, there are some films on this list that I just sadly did not get to review. Shirkers is one of them. This is a Netflix documentary that is another masterful film from them. For me, this is up there with Jim and Andy as one of the best documentaries they've done. And what I really love about this film is, sure, it does tell this really interesting mystery of these two girls, these three girls making this movie in Singapore, and you see that passion that they really do have, but then that guy, of course, ends up taking the footage. But it really is a film that I think is inspiring to anyone that appreciates this medium. Anyone that just watches movies casually, they should watch this film because you see the passion that these three girls have. I mean, there really was nothing like this in Singapore before. What they were going to do was going to be revolutionary. And to see that just kind of stripped away from them and them having to move on with their lives, it really is heartbreaking to watch. But they do such a great job with telling the story. It's honestly unbelievable that this did actually happen. It's one of the few documentaries I'm going to be talking about that it's pretty unbelievable that something like this happened. But overall, it's a very effective film. I really do hope that their film sees the light of day somehow because it definitely made me really want to watch it. It shows you how, it really makes you appreciate this medium a little bit more. It's a really great documentary. Not enough people are talking about, but if you have Netflix, definitely give it a watch because I really do think it is something great. Now, this was a really great year for coming-of-age films, as this entire decade has been, but one of the best among all of them this year had to have been mid-90s, which is a relatively simple film. It's about this kid who's living not in the greatest place, and he wants to be a skater and things like that, but it's much more than that. This is really a film about, seeing the good in people that seem inherently bad. I mean, these group of people, they don't seem like people that our main character Stevie should be hanging out with, but you grow that love, you see what they're dealing with, and you start to gain a lot of sympathy and empathy for them, and I think they did such a great job with that. A lot of films try to shy away from that, but that's why this film really did it for me more than others, because it basically treated everyone as human. It showed the struggle that they're going through and why this is, basically their outlet. This is why they love to skate, and I think that was so well done here. Sonny Soljic continues to impress me as an actor. It was very funny. It was very emotional at times, but above all, it was just a really damn good film. That is another big hit for A24. Three Identical Strangers is one of the most shocking things I've seen all year. It honestly astounds me that this is a true story, because what starts off as a, nice little heartwarming story about these three twins finding each other eventually unravels into one of the most just sickening and shocking conspiracies I've ever seen. I mean, just what these boys had to go through, the reason that all three of them were subjected to what they were, it's just disgusting to think about. And what this film leaves you with, this sort of lingering, the ending that it leaves you with, the sort of question that it imposes to you, it's terrifying to think about. And I really don't want to say much more than that. It's a film that you really should go into knowing absolutely nothing at all. I went into it as blind as possible. The only thing I knew was like the basic story of them finding each other, and thank God I did, because it is easily one of the most effective films of the entire year for that very reason. It's a great documentary. I know a lot of people don't like watching documentaries, but this is one you should absolutely give a watch because it's compelling, it's shocking, and I think it'll definitely leave a long-lasting impact on you. It definitely has on me, especially, like I said, with that final scene. The Hate U Give is easily the most surprising film that I have seen all year. I went into this film really expecting it to be very one-note and very pandering, and it's anything but that. It treats this issue of police brutality in such a delicate manner. It does a great job of really presenting both sides, especially in that scene with Common where, he's talking to Star and telling her, the mindset that this police officer had. It really does a great job of humanizing everyone. Amanda Stenberg just shows how amazing an actress she can be when you give her great material, but it also does a great job of showing protests and things like that. It's a very timely film, but it's one that handles it in a very different way. It also portrays gang life, I think, in a very realistic manner. The family's great. Everyone really did a great job acting-wise. The story that really impacted me in a way that I really wasn't expecting to, and like I said, it's easily the most surprising film of the year. I never thought it would be on my best list, but really looking back, when I think of films that had a very large impact on me and has a very memorable story and characters that really gave me that emotional gut punch, this film is definitely there, and I think it's definitely one of the best films of the entire year for that reason. but Mandy is easily one of my favorites of the entire year, just by the very fact of the type of film it is. This is a revenge story, and sure, we've seen that many times before, but rarely do we get the character development that we're given to both of these characters. Both Red and Mandy were just such interesting individuals. The sort of story they were going through, it was very different, it was very out there, but that's why I really ate it up as much as I did. This is a very strange movie, and it's turning a lot of people off. The majority of people I know do not like this movie, and I can totally understand that, but for me, I found this to be so enthralling, so investing, and sure, it definitely gives you that sort of hypnotizing, dreamlike feel, but that's exactly what they are going for here. Nicolas Cage, I think, gives one of the best performances he's given in years. I mean, he was really firing on all cylinders, especially in that bathroom scene. I mean, that alone is enough of a reason to recommend this movie, but then when you factor in the various color palettes that the cinematographer employed, and the score in this film is just fantastic. The villain in this movie is otherworldly. I mean, there's so much to love about this film. It's a film that really does, it's a film that has tons of uncertainty, but that's why I really loved it as much as I did. I know a lot of people aren't fans of it, but personally, I really loved it. I think it was extremely investing. I think it's really different and out there, and it's a type of film that I really wish we'd see more of. Sure, it definitely does have parallels to David Lynch, but I really don't think it's ripping it off. Panos Cosmatos is definitely a director that I am definitely going to be watching out for, and after this film, one thing is for sure, when you give Nicolas Cage some great material, he can definitely be really great, and you definitely don't want to come into contact with him and some kind of chainsaw, that is for sure. And for all those reasons alone, Mandy definitely deserves to be on this list. Klansman is one of the many timely films this year that just really hit all the right notes. Not only is this film leaving a huge impact on you, and it definitely does a great job with handling the type of issues that it's trying to tell, but it also was so entertaining. This film was so much funnier than I was expecting. It does a great job at just showing how dumb some of the KKK members were. It has some of the best performances of the year from both John David Washington, Topher Grace, Adam Driver. Really, everyone's just killing it in this film. Spike Lee definitely is back on top for sure. I think definitely he's going to be getting a lot more love after this film. And the ending of this film especially, it's one that at first I thought was a bit overbearing, but it really has left an impact on me since, and it's one that I think definitely deserves to be talked about. It's one of the best endings of the entire year. There are so many things I loved about this film. It has a great screenplay, it's very funny and entertaining, but again, it also has some really relevant and important political issues that I do think are very well handled here. Everything about this film I really do love. It's one of the most entertaining of the year. It's one of the most effective of the year, and it definitely deserves to be a spot on this list. Isle of Dogs is a film that has seemed to fly under people's radar and that they've just simply forgotten, and I really don't understand why. I mean, for me, this is everything you could want in a Wes Anderson film. It's a film that is so endlessly creative and different, especially when it comes to things that Wes Anderson does. I mean, I've said this so many times before, every film he does, he's essentially reinventing himself, and that definitely does ring true here. I mean, this film was very much a tribute to, say, like Akira Kurosawa or any sort of Japanese auteur filmmaker out there, and I think he definitely did a great job with that. But then when you factor in the story with the dogs and them helping out the human in the film, Atari Kobayashi, you know, their sort of bond. It's really well done. Bryan Cranston's arc is so great here. He does such a great job as the main character in this film, whose name has escaped me because I unfortunately haven't seen this film in a while, but it has some really relevant social issues as well. It just really does everything that I could have wanted. I really don't know why so many people were let down by this. I think this is basically everything you could want in a Wes Anderson film. I really loved it a lot. It's definitely stuck with me. It's one that I need to rewatch very soon, and it definitely, I think, should be getting a lot more attention than it is. Suspiria is easily one of the best remakes I think I've ever seen, and that's because it really is not a remake. This is an entirely different film, you know, despite the fact you have the dancers and different and the same character names and things like that. It's a completely different film altogether. It is a complete reinvention, and thank God for that. I mean, this film, it goes into so many different places than the first one. I mean, just alone with its lack of color, which the first one had so much brightness and vibrant colors and things like that. This one strips it of that entirely, and it has a much different type of story to it, a much more complex story, centering on the conflict going on in Berlin and how that has affected one of Tilda Swinton's many characters, but also getting into the whole dancing aspect. I mean, that's a big part of this movie as well. Dakota Johnson proves that she is a fantastic actress here. Between this and a couple other films she did this year, I think she definitely is starting to head in the right direction as an actress. Tilda Swinton gave one of the best performances the entire year, from what she did as, you know, the as Madam, I can't remember her name right now, but the main sort of dance teacher, and then when she is the older man, I mean, the contrast between those two, it does not feel like the same person. She gave one of the best performances the entire year. It was very scary. We all remember that mirror scene, which I do think is going to be a classic scene in terms of this decade for sure. I think when we look at like the best scenes of this decade in terms of horror, I think that's definitely going to be up there. It had a brilliant score from Tom York, some of the best cinematography in the entire year. It really did everything that I wanted to do. It's a very different type of horror film for sure, and it definitely is a very different film from the Dario Argento one, but isn't that what we wanted? I mean, did you guys want a complete did you want a complete rehashing of this? I certainly didn't. This to me is everything that we really could have gotten in this you know, rebranding of Suspiria overall. It's like I said, it's a complete reinvention, and thank God for that. I think this is a very different type of film, but it's one that I absolutely loved. It's 2.5 hours, but I really never felt the length once, and I pretty much loved every single minute of it. Widows is yet another one that is just not gaining enough attention, and I don't know why. I mean, the cast here alone should be giving a lot more traction. I mean, Viola Davis, Elizabeth Debicki, Daniel Kaluuya, those three performances alone are just so incredible in this movie, especially Kaluuya, who is just on a whole different level here from that of Get Out. He's harrowing, he's really scary to watch, he's one of the best villains, I think, of this entire year. There's just something about him that just looking in his eyes, you're just terrified of him. Viola Davis gives one of the best performances of her entire career as well, as someone who's just very relentless, but also is trying to process the grief that she's going through. Elizabeth Debicki gave a real star-making performance here. The heist itself was very well done, but it was much more of a character-driven story than it was a heist film, and I think they did that very well. The political stuff tied in very nicely, much more than I was expecting it to. The cinematography is at the top of its game. The score is fantastic here. Steve McQueen did such a great job directing this film. Again, it really is everything that I really wanted it to be. I think this is such a well-done heist film. It's a very different kind of heist film. It has an amazing twist as well that I definitely don't want to spoil, but it's definitely one of the best screenplays of the year, some of the best acting of the year, and just overall one of the best of the year overall. Saying a film like Avengers Infinity War was a big film is an understatement. I mean, this was likely the most anticipated film of all time. There's no way this film should have delivered. I mean, the hype was so monumental here, and the fact that it delivered in the way that it did and honestly exceeded my already high expectations is enough of a reason to be on this list. But then when you factor in how many characters are in this movie, and that they're able to juggle as many as they are, and it never feels overstuffed, and it feels coherent, I mean, that is a very tall task, and they really did pay off here. Thanos is one of the best villains I've seen in any superhero film this decade. I think he is such a compelling and menacing villain, but also one that you really do understand, and one that really has a great motivation to him that many villains just simply don't have. And Josh Brolin, I think, gave one of the best performances of his career in this film for sure. All of the characters, even the ones that don't have a lot to do, they all have various things that they're dealing with here. I think Zoe Saldana gave her best performance in the entire series as well. Tom Holland, I mean, just from that one scene alone, we can see that this was definitely the right choice for Spider-Man. I mean, he knows exactly what he's doing. And then, of course, the ending of this film. I mean, what can I say that hasn't been said already? It's so devastating, it's so shocking, and it makes me so excited to see when that second one is coming out. Thank God we only have 4 months till the next one. That's all I'm going to say. Amazing film overall. Now, because The Tale's an HBO Go film, a lot of people I don't think saw it, and that is very unfortunate because I think this is one of the most important and effective films of the entire year. I mean, this was a film that, for this director, was very hard to do. This was a story that she repressed for a long time, and finally bringing it out in a public eye and not being afraid to show exactly what she went through. I mean, hats off to her, honestly. I cannot commend her enough for doing that, and that alone is enough of a reason to watch this film. But then when you factor in Laura Dern's performance, which is likely the best performance I think she's ever given, I mean, it really is just that great. And the story that you're dealing with here, I mean, this is a story that's coming out, and it is this was a real story. This is something that actually did happen to this director, and knowing what she actually went through, the struggle that she overcame, and also that unsatisfaction that she gets is just fantastic. This movie just did everything that it should have. It was effective, it was hard hitting, it wasn't afraid to show you some stuff that you really wish you didn't see, and it told a very accurate portrayal of what I'm sure is probably one of the most harrowing experiences of this woman's life, but thank God she told it. A lot of people would just, they like to pretend these things never happened and they try to repress them, but the fact that she actually came out and was able to tell this story and wasn't afraid to basically show just how embarrassing and awful of an experience this was for her, again, I can't commend her enough, and that alone is enough of a reason to put this film on here. Look, I can understand if some people were not a fan of this film because it is absolutely bonkers and ridiculous, but that's why I really did love it. It's so inventive, it's so out there, but it also is hilarious. This is a film that has so much great social commentary about telemarketing, but especially on the idea of capitalism. The film really understood that very well, and it was not trying to be a film about, racist type stuff. I mean, the director even said that he tried to make sure that this was a film that didn't try to appeal to a certain, culture or a certain, era, because he wants this film to feel timeless. And I think that was definitely the right way to go about it. Boots Riley definitely has a bright future ahead of him. Armie Hammer gave one of the best performances of his entire career. Like, Stanfield is fantastic here. And of course, the twists in this movie, I mean, it's insane, but again, I really do applaud them for going there. I think it's one of the most genius things I've seen all year. There's so many things to love about this film. Everyone remembers the rap scene, which, oh my God, that scene was incredible. And then, of course, there's that reality show as well. I mean, what Lakeith Stanfield has to do in that scene, it's disgusting, but again, it's a very accurate portrayal of what someone in that situation would have to go through. Overall, I just think this is one of the most inventive and original films of the year, and for that reason alone, it definitely deserves to be on this list. Green Book, it was basically what I wanted Driving Miss Daisy to be. This was a really great character-driven film, of a film that definitely had race issues in there, but it really is about these two characters getting to understand each other. The impact that Mahershala Ali has on, Viggo Mortensen's character and the relationship that these two really do form. It's one of the best pairings of the year. It has one of the funniest gags of the year involving the fast food stuff, which I just absolutely adored. Everything about that was hilarious. And like I said, the social commentary was not in your face. They were very subtle about it. They did a good job with showing how this affects Mahershala Ali's character, and both of these performances are some of the best of the year. They definitely are going to get a lot of Oscar love, and they absolutely should get that consideration. It's one of the best screenplays of the year. It's just overall one of the most entertaining and enjoyable films of the entire year. It is a crowd pleaser, but it's one of those crowd pleasers that I can't help but also love, because I can totally understand why people love this one. I think it's just as great as everyone has said, and for me, it's definitely one of my favorites of the year. Now, Leave No Trace is another one that I unfortunately did not get to review to you guys, and I really wish I did a full review for it, because I think this is one of the most effective and it's just compelling films of the entire year. I mean, It's a very simple film. It's Ben Foster and Thomasin McKenzie, and they are both living in not very good living conditions. They are illegally living on public property, and they're kicked out and things like that. And you know, for Thomasin McKenzie, this is the only world that she's really known. And for Ben Foster, he does this because this is his way of dealing with his PTSD. He was formerly in the military, and it's very much affected him. And just the relationship that these two eventually do form, there's just something really endearing about it. But you also see the difference that they really have. Thomasin McKenzie in particular, I mean, this really is her movie. Like, Ben Foster is fantastic, but this is her movie, and she really does evolve as the film does go on, and where she eventually does go. It's just really well done. The film asks a lot of questions about, should we conform, or, what do we do if we just completely refuse to conform? And I think that's definitely a very interesting idea. It's very emotional. It's definitely a very heartbreaking film. You really do love the relationship that these two have, but again, just the differences that they feel. They have very different worldviews. They have very different ways of thinking, and you see how that does very much affect them, and that alone, the ending of this film alone, is enough for reason to put it on this list. But then when you factor in, like I said, the two performances from Ben Foster and Thomasin McKenzie, it is masterful work, and I really loved everything about it. I really want to do a full review for this one, but unfortunately I didn't, but it is absolutely deserves to be on this list regardless. This was a really great year for foreign films, but Burning is one of the many that very much stood out for me. This is a film that, it starts off and you think you know where it's going to go. It's a nice little romantic drama. There's sort of like a love triangle in there. You think we meet these two that have known each other since they were children and things like that, and there's a really great introduction there. But then things just start to go weird. Suddenly she's missing, and there's a whole other sort of mystery that develops, and it very quickly becomes, I think, one of the best thrillers of this entire decade. There's so much in this film that I was not predicting. There really isn't a single thing here that really, didn't surprise me. I was pretty much on the edge of my seat throughout this entire film. It's one of those films you really have to pay very close attention to, and it really, it relishes in the idea of the mundane. Just simple little mundane conversations have a much bigger impact than you really would expect them to, and those are the kind of films that I really do love. Ah Hin-Yu gives one of the best performances the entire year. Steven Yeun as well gives maybe the best work I've ever seen from him. Those two alone are enough for a reason to check it out, but then when you factor in the cinematography and the score and just the editing of the film is over 2.5 hours long, but I never really felt a second of it. I was very much into this. I think this is one of the most riveting films the entire year. It's one that isn't getting enough attention. I'm really hoping it's not going to get shut out by the Oscars. I know it was by the Golden Globes, but I'm really hoping the Oscars don't shut it out, because it definitely deserves all the attention it could possibly get. And like I said, to me, it's one of the best mystery or thrillers, whatever you want to really classify it as, of the entire decade. It really is just that investing, and one that I think a lot more people should be watching for sure. Madeline's Madeline is exactly my kind of movie. And look, that's incredibly subjective, I know, but this is my list, and that's the thing. This is my list, and, I can understand if some people don't like this movie. It is definitely the weirdest film I have seen all year. No question about it. There is nothing weirder than this film. But again, I said this in my review, when you have a character that is this unstable and is this, just fucked up in the sense that Madeline is, obviously it's going to be very strange. Obviously it's going to be very weird. I mean, we're in her mind throughout most of this movie. The way she views the world, yeah, it's really wonky. Yes, it's very out there, but that's why I really do love this film. It's not afraid to get into some really weird, avant-garde sort of directions, but it also is a really great character study of this girl that has this very contentious relation with her mother, and she starts to get closer to this theater teacher, but is this theater teacher, what she's doing, harming or helping her? I mean, there's a lot of interesting things that this film does. It has some of the best visuals of the entire year. Helena Howard gives, I think, the most understated performance of this entire year. I've heard nobody, I mean, I've heard a couple people, but I have really not heard many people talk about her, and they absolutely should, because she is just phenomenal. She's firing on all cylinders, and I really wish she was getting more attention. It's so odd that I can understand why a lot of people aren't going to check it out, but for me, it's the exact amount of weird, but also that it has enough substance in there for me to really love it as much as I did. It's one of my, it's just such a peculiar film, but it's one of those films that since I saw it, I just have not been able to stop thinking about, and for that reason alone, it definitely deserves to be on here. I've honestly been really surprised that If Beale Street Could Talk has not been getting more, for lack of a better word, talk. I feel like more people should be talking about this movie. It's Barry Jenkins, and sure, this isn't as amazing as Moonlight, but I still really do love this film. It's a much more of a character drama. It has a much more complex story to it, but the characters here are just so rich. It's a very human story. The relationship between the two central characters alone is enough of a reason to check it out, but then when you factor in the performances from this movie for top to bottom, everyone is so well casted. Some of the best scenes, I think, of the entire year in this film. I mean, the scene alone where I don't want to spoil it, but they end up going into this like house and he shows her like this whole plan of what he wants to do for her. I mean, it's just so sweet, and to see that relationship just upended, what ends up happening to it, it's very devastating to watch, but it's a film that is very timely. Stuff like this does sadly still happen, and this film is not afraid to really get into that. It's very emotional. Regina King definitely deserves the attention she's been getting, but Kiki Lane and Stephen James are equally just as deserving. It's a really great film. It's got some of the best dialogue, one of the best screenplays in the entire year, and it's another film that I just wish was getting a lot more love. Barry Jenkins continues to show why he's one of the best screenwriters out there, and definitely deserves to be, I think, on a lot more lists, because I think this is definitely a fantastic film for sure. This is the fourth adaptation. I want you guys to remember that. The fourth adaptation of this story, and yet somehow it feels as fresh and original as if it was a new story. And that's because it kind of was. I mean, A Star is Born, sure, it followed similar beats from the other adaptations where, okay, yes, he meets up with her and he's drunk and things like that, and there's definitely problems within their relationship, but it's much more sympathetic to the Norman, or in this case Jackson, character. It's much more sympathetic to him. You get a lot more into his story, what he's really going through, and it really gives you a very different kind of film that just overall makes you root for these two a lot more. You're given a lot more reasons to care for them and their relationship. I do still think the Judy Garland version is the best, but this one comes pretty damn close. I mean, what Lady Gaga is able to do here as well is just astonishing. Bradley Cooper completely transformed into this role. He gave one of the best performances of the year. If he wins that Oscar, he's honestly very deserving of it. I would not be upset if he took home that Oscar, because I think he definitely deserves it here. He just completely transformed into the character of Jackson Maine. Sam Elliott was also fantastic here. The songs, I mean, who isn't still listening to Shallow? Who isn't still listening to I'll Never Fall in Love Again? Those two alone are enough of a reason to check out this film. But then when you factor in just how personal a film this was. The cinematography is still some of my favorite of the entire year. I love the sound design to this movie. The editing's fantastic. This is one of those films that just does everything a remake should do. It did a great job with retaining what made the other adaptations great, but also adding something new and fresh to it that just, you forgot you were watching a remake. You forgot of what happened in the other adaptations, and that's when you know you have a great film on your hands, and that is why it's absolutely on this list at number 12. I am honestly shocked that more people are not loving Mary Poppins Returns, because for me, being the massive fan that I am of the first one, this is everything that I could have wanted in a sequel. It retained all the stuff that made the first one great, but similar to a couple other films I've discussed, it isn't the same type of movie. It's a very different kind of sequel. It's a little bit more complex. The characters are grown up. The kids themselves are very different. And thank God for that, because it's not trying to redo the first movie. Emily Blunt specifically, didn't watch Julie, she purposely didn't watch Julie Andrews' in the original film because she wanted to bring something new and fresh to the role, and I'm really glad that she did that because she brings a very different but a very welcomed interpretation of Mary Poppins, and I think she did a really great job with that. Lin-Manuel Miranda's also fantastic here. I'm really hoping that he does more screen work out, more movie roles after this, because he definitely is a huge scene stealer here. I love the kids in this movie. Ben Whishaw was fantastic. It's very emotional, and the musical numbers alone, I can't get them out of my head. I really don't understand what people are saying when the songs are forgettable, because for me at least, I've been listening to them constantly. I can't stop listening to Nowhere to Go But Up, A Cover Is Not the Book, The Place Where Lost Things Go, Underneath the Lovely London Sky. They're all hits in my eyes. There's so many great cameos in this movie. There's so much love with the first one, but again, it tries to be its own thing. It does have a lot of winks and nods to the first one, but its sole purpose is to continue the story, and thank God for that. There's a lot of stuff that Disney is remaking, but this is much closer to what they need to be doing. It doesn't even feel like a modern film. It feels like a film that's ripped right out of the 1960s, and thank God for that. It feels like it would come after the first one. Nothing about it feels like a 2018 film. It's also extremely rewatchable, even though, it's not number 10 on this list. I actually do think that it is a bit more rewatchable than some of the higher entries on this list, solely because of just how much fun and how much joy I have in watching this movie. I mean, when I get out of this, I had the biggest smile on my face. I was honestly stunned by how great it was, and it's rare for a movie of this scale and something that's like a family film to elicit a reaction out of me like that. But the way it was able to do that, that alone gets it a spot on this list. All right, guys, so this is it. The top 10 best films of 2018. These are the ones that I just constantly am thinking back to. These are the ones that I really can't get out of my head. They're ones that if you haven't seen them, you need to check them out eventually, whether they were the most effective or they were the most rewatchable. Either way, they all have a very happy spot on this list, starting off with number 10. At first glance, Searching just looked like another hybrid of like Unfriended or any of the other failed laptop horror movies that were going on, and it was really anything but that. Sure, this film does take place on a laptop, but it's not at all a gimmick. There's a very specific purpose for why that is. The family they really get you attached to, and still one of my favorite opening sequences of the entire year that was very reminiscent of Up or something like that. John Cho gives the performance of his career here as a relentless father that is just destined to answer questions. The mystery itself is so compelling. You really do find yourself getting wrapped up in here. The twist alone, I really did love. But the other thing I love about this movie is just the main sort of message it leaves you with. The searching is not just searching for his daughter. It's really about him and Deborah Messing, two parents who are struggling for means of connection. They're trying to connect with their kids, and I think it's a very good message in that way. It's a very intense film. It really had me on the edge of my seat at points in the way that other films just don't. When the film ended, I was like covered in sweat. Like I was really just that engrossed into what was going on. It's one of the most intense films that I've seen in a while, and just overall is everything that great thrillers should be. But again, it's those characters and the performances that really do elevate it on another level for me, and for that reason alone, it is definitely deserving at number 10. Eighth grade, one of my favorite coming-of-age films of this entire decade, and look, a lot of people are going to say, oh, it's this year's Lady Bird, but I've said it before, I don't think this film is comparable to really any of those, because it's a different type of film altogether. It's much more intimate, it's much more quiet, and it's a lot more simplistic, but at the same time, it's a lot more complex, especially when you center on Kayla, someone who is very much an outsider, so much so that she slurs her words and has trouble talking to people, and that's one of the things I love about this movie, is just how blatantly honest it was. Kayla is not someone that is this perfect individual. She has a lot of problems. She's very socially awkward. She has acne on her face. I mean, how rare is how often do you see someone like that in one of these type of films? And that was just so refreshing to see. A teen that really wasn't perfect at all. She's the farthest thing from it, and Elsie Fisher just commanded this film. I really can't wait to see what she's going to do next after this. I think she's definitely going to be a star. I'm so happy to see that she got that Golden Globe nomination. So many funny moments. I mean, the banana gag, we all remember the scene with the banana, one of the funniest things the entire year still. But also Josh Hamilton, this film as her dad, also did an incredible job here. It's just a really relatable coming of age story that a lot of people aren't talking about anymore, unfortunately. But I think they absolutely should. I think this is one of the most important of the decade. I think it's definitely one of the best of the decade for sure. And hopefully there is more to come. And this is where A24 really does excel. And this is another fantastic coming of age film for them. Definitely very deserving at number 9. This year was a much better year for animation, and I had already thought that we had gotten the best of out of animation when I saw Isle of Dogs, Ralph Breaks the Internet, and Incredibles 2, and a couple others. And then out of nowhere just comes Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and just wipes all those others away. I mean, this film is everything you could want in both a comic book film, but also an animated film. Just the scale of what this movie was able to accomplish is incredible. The fact that we're able to get all these different styles of animation and combine it into one movie, and it still feels coherent, and it never feels overstuffed, and somehow it still blends in organically with the world. It's just, I don't know how they pulled it off. It's no easy feat, and somehow they were able to do it, and it is astounding how they were able to do that. The characters here are so well written. Every single one of these characters just had such a great backstory to them. I love the quick, like, comic book style backstories we got there. That was fantastic, but primarily Miles Morales, I mean, such a great lead character that we really hadn't seen before. The calming between him and his dad, his mentoring by Jake Johnson's Peter Parker. I mean, there's just so much to love about this movie. The action set pieces are great. It's very emotional. It's got a great story to it. It's hilarious. I mean, it really is everything you could want in a great Spider-Man movie. It's the most creative one we've gotten to date. It makes me very excited to see where they're going with this series moving forward, and definitely is the best superhero film and the best animated film of the entire year for sure. This was a great year for both of those categories, but this is absolutely the best of them. Now, I already mentioned how great of a year it was for documentaries, which it absolutely was. I mean, these are the most documentaries I've seen in any year, and, definitely there were some great ones out there, like I said, Three-Eyed Angle Strangers and Shirkers, but none of them affected me quite as much as this is a film I've wanted to talk about for a very long time, and now I finally can. But I grew up with Mr. Rogers when I was younger, and he was definitely, it was definitely one of my favorite shows as a kid. But that being said, this film just gets you to appreciate him even more. Not only was he such an iconic figure, but he really was, I think, the voice of a generation. I mean, Fred Rogers was someone who he loved the idea of television, but felt it was being misused, and he really wanted to come in and use it as a tool, not just to entertain, but also to educate children, to instill these lessons into their lives and feel the impact that it has on them. And it makes us wish that someone like him was still out there, that we still had a Mr. Rogers Neighborhood, which sadly would not survive these days because of all the bells and whistles being stripped away. I mean, it was a very simplistic show in that regard, but it's those life lessons and the impact of Fred Rogers that really does linger on. It's such a great documentary showing the impact he had on all of them. It's very joyful, but again, it's sad because, you know, we can all try to be like him, but there never will be another Fred Rogers, and I don't think he would be, sadly, as accepted today as he was then. But in our very negative and cynical world, this is the kind of film we really do need. It shows how positive an individual he really was. It shows the difference he made on everyone and how we all can really learn from him. Even though, like I said, Fred Rogers himself is irreplaceable, we all can try to be like Fred Rogers, have that positive attitude, try to instill these lessons, try to think the best of ourselves and not just focus on all the negative qualities. That's stuff that Mr. Rogers was very much passionate about, and I think that's something that this film definitely left me with. It left a huge impact on me. It's one of the most emotional films of the year, and it's also one of the best documentaries, I think, of this entire decade. If you haven't seen it, check it out, but for all those reasons and more, it's a film that since I've seen, I've not been able to stop think about. It's one of the most rewatchable films of the year, and it definitely is very deserving at number 7. So at number six, there's a lot of action movies that were released this year, and a lot of them were very disappointing. However, there are some action movies that come out, and you just know right off the bat that they are going to be a classic. And it's very rare when one of them happens. Sometimes, that's happened like with Mad Max Fury Road and things like that. But this film is absolutely one that I think will definitely go down as one of the greatest action films, maybe of all time. And I'm of course talking about. Look, what can I say about this that hasn't already been said and that I already didn't say in my review? I mean, this is everything that we could want in a Mission Impossible film. It really feels like the culmination of everything. Ethan Hunt has his biggest arc yet. Basically, every single thing he's done has pretty much come to haunt him. Henry Cavill was extraordinary as the villain in this film, who, I mean, where he ends up going in this film. I mean, where has this Henry Cavill been? It makes me wish that we saw more of this Henry Cavill and he put this much effort into these Superman films. I am convinced that him getting away from that character is the best possible thing that he could have done, considering how great he was here. Rebecca Ferguson's great here. There's so many amazing action scenes. I mean, just the helicopter sequence in general is just so nerve-wracking. It's one of those films that if you did not get to see this in the theater, you really did miss out. I think it definitely, it definitely does hold up on Blu-ray and things like that, and I think you'll definitely enjoy it, but you're not going to get that same impact that you got when you first watched it on the big screen, especially that climax. For me, that was one of the most stressful and just nail-biting things that I saw all year. I was just white-knuckled throughout basically this entire film. It's everything you could want in an action movie. When, Ethan isn't okay, you're freaking out. His entire team's life is on the line at this point, and there's just so much to love here. It's a lot of fun. It's got some great action sequences. It's got a great story to it. Pretty much everyone has come back here, and it really makes me want a Mission Impossible 7, but also kind of worry, like, how can they possibly top this? I mean, this seems like it's as great as the series can possibly get. How often is the sixth movie in a franchise this good? That, like, never happens, but somehow this series is still going strong. It, I think, is the best action series currently going on today, and it very much just shows what you can do when all the chips are in play. Christopher McQuarrie was absolutely the right person to get back for this. This is just everything that I could possibly want in an action movie, but it also is a damn good movie as well. It's got a great story to it. Like I said, Henry Cavill was just an amazing villain. Tom Cruise is as great as he ever is. Just everything about Mission Impossible Fallout, I fucking love, and for all those reasons and more, it is definitely my number 6. Now, number 5, you guys might be a little bit surprised by, because originally this was a film that I did not think was a 5 out of 5. I actually gave this film an A. However, I recently revisited it, and after that, it's one of those films where I watched it and I was just like, wait, what are my problems again? And that And yeah, I mean, I love this film when I first saw it, but I loved it even more on a rewatch. Just the very witty and just spunky nature of this film, I just absolutely love. I love that this film has no limits whatsoever. It has maybe my favorite screenplay of the entire year. Olivia Colman, Emma Stone, Rachel Weisz, I mean, all three of them are just at the top of their game here. But I also want to shout out Nicholas Hoult. I never really mentioned him in my movie review. That's because I had a hard time kind of telling the difference between him and Joe Alwyn. But on a rewatch, he is so great in this movie. So underrated. I loved what he did in this film. He's absolutely hilarious. I mean, especially his interplay with Emma Stone. I absolutely love everything he does. He sets up a lot of the chess pieces in this film as well, which I thought was fantastic. But something else this film does so well is, yes, it's a lot of fun, and there are so many funny moments. This is easily my favorite comedy of the year, but the thing this film does so much, it does even better than the comedy, is just the character growth that all of these individuals undergo. I mean, every single one of these characters, you understand where they're coming from. They all have some sort of traumatic past, and the way that all does culminate into what it does is very effective. You don't expect this film to go the places it does. It's very unpredictable. Lanthimos definitely, even when a lot of his, similar stuff is stripped away, like the stilted dialogue and things like that, this is still a very messed up and weird film, but it is one that has definitely stuck with me. I think it's probably going to end up being one of the most rewatchable films of the entire year. I think Lanthimos is one of the best directors working today. I can't wait to see what he's going to do next. Every single year, every single year, whatever film he's made, it's always ended up somewhere on my top 10 list. And this very well might be his best yet. I need to rewatch The Lobster, but I love everything about this film. And the ending, especially, a lot of people didn't like it, but I think it's one of the most genius endings of the entire year. I don't want to say too much more about it, but it's such a great film. It's consistently entertaining, but it also has a really great story to it and some really great characters. It says a lot about competition and things like that. Three of the best performances of the entire year. There's just so much to love about this film, and for all those reasons alone, it is definitely my number 5. Beautiful Boy is probably one of the most emotional films I think I've ever seen. This is a film that, sure, it covers stuff that we've seen before, but not quite in this way. It's a story that is nonlinear, and a lot of people had a problem with that. For me, I think it only strengthened the story because it is very messy and complicated. The story of David and his son, played by Timothy Chalamet, who gives another just absolutely incredible performance, and the complicated relationship that they have, especially for Carell, someone who is so patient and rarely ever gets mad at his son. He tries to see the good in him, but just seeing him starting to lose less hope over will his son ever get better? Is he ever going to get clean? It's absolutely devastating to watch. And knowing that this is based on a true story and that stuff like this does actually happen, it just really saddens me. And it definitely got me several times. This is actually the film that, out of all the films I watched this year, this is the one that I cried the most at. This is definitely the one that got me the most teary-eyed, and it's interesting because we're only at number 4, and the other three films on this list, they definitely did get me emotional, but out of all the ones on this list, this one definitely had the most visceral reaction from me. I thought this one, it was definitely just very emotional. I really got into the story here. Where it ends up going was definitely not what I was expecting. And the one phone call scene in this movie, especially with Steve Carell, two things. One, I don't know how he is not in the conversation for Best Actor. He absolutely should be. I think it's the best performance of his entire career. Two, I think in general, that scene alone just shows why it's on my list. I mean, that phone call scene, it's so well done, it's so ballsy, and it just feels so honest and real, and that's one of the reasons why I love this movie above many others. Roma is easily one of the most intimate and tender films that I think I've ever seen. I've never seen this level of mastercraft, and I think this level of dedication that was really put into this film, going as far as to have Alfonso Cuarón literally do everything. Most times that's not a good sign, but for this film, I don't think he could have made a better choice. I mean, this is the most important film, and I think the most, probably the most inspiring film of his entire career. I mean, this very much was a passion project for him, trying to cover his life as accurately as possible, and beautifully showing it through this family, especially through the likes of Cleo, Yalitza Aparicio, who I am still baffled how she is not an actress. I mean, just the level of emotion and the level of just charisma that she gives to the screen. It seems like she was already an actress, but she's not. She really is just that natural at it. And I really loved what she was able to do here. Particularly the beach scene in general was a huge highlight. The family you really love, the situation they were going through was definitely very complex. And sure, a lot of people have complained that not a lot happens in this film, but that's why those last 30 minutes are so effective, because we have had enough time to get attached to this family, see what they're going through, see their sort of situation that they're in. And when we eventually get to the part where stuff finally starts to happen and shit finally starts to go down, it is that much more effective. Out of all the films I'm reviewing, honestly, this is probably the most technically well made. Like, this is definitely the quote unquote best. And it definitely, if it's someone's number one, I can definitely understand that. Like, it's definitely pretty damn close. And also, the sound design in this movie is just out of this world. I still can't get over how just incredible it really is. This is one of the most intimate films I think I've ever seen. It's so captivating. It has some of the most stunning imagery ever. It is able to do something as simple as a woman cleaning a floor and somehow make that compelling. And it entranced me into this world. It did something that I did not expect it to do. It's the best film Netflix has ever done, and it better be getting a lot of awards because it definitely does deserve it. And hopefully, finally gets Netflix to turn their shit around and finally, maybe change their mindset, even though that's probably not possible. Either way, still an amazing film. Hereditary is easily one of the scariest films I have seen in years. And you guys know, it is not easy to scare me when it comes to horror films. It's just, many of them, they may be creepy, they may definitely have a really good story, but rarely does it have as big of an impact on me as Hereditary really does. This movie was so terrifying that it made me scared of leaving the theater. It was one of those films where after it was over and the credits were rolling, I had to stay in the theater to collect myself because it just had that big of an effect on me. It's a film that, sure, there aren't a lot of jump scares and things like that, but it just has this lingering sense of tension and eeriness that other horror films just aren't able to do. It's character driven. You care about the Graham family and the situation that they're in. The one moment in this film, especially involving a car, I mean, it makes me terrified to ever go into a car at night again. For a while, I really did not want to go into a car again because of how terrifying that one scene was. But it also, just like I said, it tells a very good story. There's a great characters to it. The ending is so masterfully crafted. It's just everything that I could want in a horror film. The cinematography is just incredible. Ari Aster, again, one of the best directorial debuts ever. I loved what he was able to do here. I can't wait to see what his next film is going to be like next year. Toni Collette is going to be sorely snubbed out of all of the awards. She should be nominated for basically everything. The fact that she's as shut out as she really is just shows how jaded the Academy can tend to be. But overall, this is everything that I could want in a horror film. It's terrifying. It oozes with this sense of eeriness, and it's number two alone for the feeling that it really did get me. It just unfortunately did not affect me as much as number one did. Look, is You Were Never Really Here the film that I'm going to go back to the most and rewatch a ton? No, but when I think of the films that I think about the most, and the films that had the biggest impact on me, and the films that I think succeeded as best as they possibly could, You Were Never Really Here does everything that I could want a film to do. This is a film that is just so different and inventive. It's able to do so much in such a small increment of time. The best way I can sum up this film for those who haven't seen it, because unfortunately it did go very under the radar, and it really does sadden me because of how great it is. It's really like having one giant panic attack for 80 minutes, and seeing that exhibited through Joe, who is masterfully portrayed by Joaquin Phoenix, who I still think gives the best performance the entire year. I mean, no one was able to give that level of emotion and that level of just sorrow that Phoenix was able to display here. You can just see the genuine emotion that he's going through. You can see the regret that he really has, and the trauma. Yes, it is very hazy. Yes, you don't get a first look into the trauma, but it's a very realistic interpretation of PTSD. These are things that he really doesn't want to remember, but he's constantly haunted by it, and he's constantly trying to find a reason to live. And no, this is not a very uplifting film, but when I really think about films that are trying to do something different and they really spoke to me, You Were Never Really Here really does do all of that. It is very effective. That lake scene is still my favorite scene of this entire year. There really isn't a single scene this year that was able to top that one. I mean, every time I see that scene, it just breaks me. It really breaks me with the way that scene is done. Ekaterina Samsonov as well, I think, is one of the most underrated performances of the entire year. The ending to this film is just poetic. I constantly find myself going going back to it. It has one of the most euphoric scores of the year as well from Johnny Greenwood, who's one of the best composers out there. The cinematography is amazing. The action is not done in a way you'd expect it. It could have been very gratuitous, but they actually do cut away from it because, again, the film is not about the action. It's about the aftermath. It's about the pain that this has on Joe, what this does to him. He's someone who is virtually emotionless, but he does feel pain. He definitely does feel these things. He just doesn't express them in the way that you or I can, and the way that's done, it's just so masterfully told. There's just so much to love about this movie. I could honestly do a 30-minute analysis just on a film that is 83 minutes long. That's the thing. This film is so short, but honestly, I could have watched another 2 or 3 hours of it. That's how much I loved this character. That's how much I loved getting into the very complex relation between him and the little girl that he eventually tries to save. I mean, there's so much to unpack with this film. If you want to see more, just watch my review. But like I said, out of all the films I watched this year, this is the one that I constantly found myself going back to. There were a lot of films that I loved, but at the end of the day, I always kept saying, did this affect me as much as You Were Never Really Here? Was this as amazing of a story as You Were Never Really Here? Sure, there are films that told amazing stories. Sure, there were films that had amazing performances, but nothing, to me at least, was as profound as an experience as You Were Never Really Here. A film that I wasn't really expecting all that much from, and I went into it completely floored. Everything about it, it exhibits every single thing that I love about cinema. It does what you want a great film to do, and I really couldn't ask for anything more. And for all those reasons and many more, it is absolutely my #1 film of 2018. And with that, guys, we have made it to the end. And yes, this was definitely, like I said, a very successful year for film. I really loved all the films that I got to review to you guys this year. But either way, guys, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I know that this was very long, but let me know what you guys thought of any of these films. Loved your thoughts on all of them. I do apologize for not getting to review some of these films to you, but that's really for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch each and every one of my movie reviews. Even if you watched a little bit of them, I still really do appreciate it. I love doing them, and I love the reactions that I get for them, and you guys definitely help with that. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.